Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our session. And if you want any notes, I have plenty of scribbled ones here in my pocket. So if you wanted, so let's kick things off. And thank you both for being on the panel. When we talk about internal mobility, I think we have to look at it from the context of the future of work. And Mark, let's lead off with you with regard to the future of work and how internal mobility fits into that, and how does that create such a challenge to get that right?
Sure, Luis. For me, I think there's three key themes in the future of work. For me, the first one will be that the future of employees will expect a very flexible environment that is adaptable. So for me, that means people will want to work in environments from any place at any time, which implies that there is a really big culture of open sharing and collaboration. The one that's probably most important for me is that the individual beliefs will become much more important than the corporate ones. So people will choose their own path. They will not rely on an organization to choose their path. There's a phrase I like, it's called a coined phrase, it's a Protean career. And that suggests that these people future workers will want to own, manage, and define their own individual careers, and they'll subjectively measure that. Fulfillment and psychological factors will be much more important in terms of as a measure of success, as opposed to things just like promotion or salary. And I think the implication underneath that for organizations is that we have to create an environment where work is meaningful, where people absolutely believe that they can grow and develop. Otherwise, you will not retain that group of people.
Thank you. Vicki, would you like to add your perspective of future of work as it relates to internal mobility?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, we heard Josh talk about it this morning. We've heard others, I can't remember the gentleman from EY, but he spoke about the half-life of skills. And the reality is that if we don't start thinking about upskilling and reskilling our own people and giving them the opportunity not only to learn the skills, but then apply them through gigs, stretch assignments, and eventually into roles full-time, you're actually not going to be able to meet your talent needs over a period of time. And it has to go hand in hand with workforce planning and kind of understanding the direction of the capabilities you're trying to build, and then creating that pipeline internally for it. We just can't, and the Great Resignation has just made it so much more challenging because you can't get those skills in the external marketplace anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'd build on that in terms of, I think skills is, as we've seen many times, is the new currency.
Absolutely.
But your legal relationship to an organization will become less important. It's going to be more about outcomes, and that doesn't necessarily mean that it's a job or a permanent career. It's more being able to do specific outcomes using your skills in a meaningful way.
It's very insightful, and with the need to provide employees with career paths that matter, that align with those skills and those capabilities. And I thought Josh made a great point this morning with regard to going from skills into capabilities. What are you doing in your companies to be able to build these skill paths that retain employees and give them an opportunity to grow?
So I can start with that. We actually do it the other way around. We start with capabilities, right? We have a very diligent process that we go through with our strategic planning process to say, if this is the strategy, what are the capabilities that we need, and which are the ones that we're going to build, buy, and partner to get. In fact, that's how we found Eightfold. We recognized early on that we wanted to go on a path of upskilling, reskilling, but we knew there was going to be a capability we'd never be able to build for ourselves. And so we went out to go find a partner to help us do that. From that capability identification, and once you get to we're going to build, borrow, partner, you actually can understand the skills you need. And so at the beginning of the year, we have a set of those capabilities and associated skills that we need. And it then becomes on my team to figure out how are we going to upskill, reskill people into them? How are we going to identify where they may be sitting ancillary in the organization, not where we think it's going to be, but where we can pull it and say, we actually need to redeploy you in a different way. Mm-hmm.
So our focus is on these career paths is actually deeply helping people understand in a simple and accurate way exactly where they are in their career. So what skills do they have today? And how does that relate to future opportunities, careers, and things that they're after? We use the phrase that we want to democratize opportunities. So making sure that people get really good career recommendations or very specific personal and purposeful learning content, which really links to creating this profile and then people seeing and believing that we are investing in their development. Then our final link is, so we're trying to change the organization from, we're starting slightly different place to you, Vicki, more around the career paths, the skills and the jobs and the learning, how that interacts. And our next phase is then saying, let's do strategic workforce planning based on skills, no longer on headcount type environments. And then using that, to your point, to inform operational resourcing strategies in each market, but also then the learning strategies.
Thank you for that. And would you like to please comment on the standpoint of how you're handling career pathing and retention and democratizing that, all those opportunities, in your large corporation? How do you provide a level playing field for everyone to be able to look at those opportunities?
So, I mean, that's been the great innovation, I think, of what platforms like Eightfold have built, is that they've created this transparency. And transparency is the first step of democratization, right? Because people have to know what is the world of opportunities that's available to them, and then where do they sit in that world, and where do they sit in that context. And the very first thing we turned on, and we turned it on for exactly the same reason that Mark was talking about, to understand what was the skill profiles of our people, and to understand how we could grow and develop them. We weren't really interested in who we were going to hire, who we were going to redeploy, or any of that. We just wanted to help people understand that we needed to grow and develop them, because we were at the precipice of a very large, wide-scale transformation at the company. And Josh talked about that as one of the key levers that drives this type of change. But it became about democratization and accessibility. I think the murder of George Floyd kind of into the summer of 2020 accelerated that, because what you'll see is in a traditional organization where there isn't technology and tools to create that transparency, opportunities go to those who are in the network. And that network tends to look like what the leaders of that company look like. And it doesn't matter, in women-led companies, the network is more female. In male-oriented companies, the network is more male, and whatever demographic you want to use. What this does is it breaks down the importance of that network, and it creates accessibility and transparency for everyone. And that then goes to the democratization. And that's been really, really critical for us. It's a challenging path because people don't like that, right? People aren't always happy that the thing that they thought they were going to get almost certainly was going to go with it. And we actually had to do a lot of policy change to augment and make sure that it coupled what the technology was able to do.
That's fascinating. How did you change the behaviors and in turn change the culture? How did you did you use metrics, or did you use a combination of factors? Because
well, I wore a bulletproof vest most days.
Yeah.
Well, the first thing we did is we changed the policy.
Yeah.
So we made 2 policy changes. One was every single opportunity, whether it was lateral or upwards, had to be posted. You could no longer go and say, Mark, I have this great opportunity on my team. You want to come try it out? Because it had to go in the talent marketplace. It had to be available for everyone to see. You had to keep the role open for 2 weeks because you needed to give people an opportunity to apply and participate in it. Those are policy changes. Mm-hmm. The next thing you have to change then is you can change the policy, and I can tell you right now, because I've found this out after 3 months, people find all sorts of ways to skirt the policy, right? There's every single backdoor, every single, well, I interviewed 3 of my friends or whatever it is. And so then we actually had to say we actually need to create new behaviors. And in internal mobility, the behavior you need to change the most is of your own internal recruiting team. Because they are stretched and challenged, and when you put policies and process in place like this, their volume actually gets even greater. And you have to make sure that they are augmented enough that they have the ability to help drive the behavior change. So they're working with a manager and saying, actually, you need 3 different candidates. Here's the slating policy. We need you to work through it. Here's the way that you do an inclusive interview. And you're constantly doing micro-learning driven through that recruiter, through a person, to help hold them accountable.
That's brilliant.
So for us, we much of that the same. Everything has to be posted online. We want to make it really easy. But we then ran a specific campaign to kind of have 3 key themes. And one was around growth, that we wanted people to really believe that there's an environment that will invest in your growth and development. This notion that the only career is kind of an upward one, we want to challenge and saying there's left and right opportunities. So making sure people believe that they can grow. The second one was then empowering people to own their own careers and have the discussions. And we talk about grow together. And that's about allowing you to grow and develop, but also you support our growth strategy as a company to create sustainable growth and achieve our kind of purpose statement, like improving 1 billion people's lives and halving our environmental impact. So those are like key themes to try and make it simpler and also change the environment. But we ran a small pilot I'll share with you. We did an experiment to create an internal mobility little app. And the tech was brilliant. We loved it. We thought it was going to be great. And when we presented it to the CHRO, she asked me the most insightful question. She said, what is the beliefs that line managers have to make this work? And in the end, it didn't work because very few line managers were willing to give 1 or 2 days, which our policy said was allowed, to work in another market, to give other skills, learn new skills in another environment, to create true intermobility. And that's one of the big challenges. I'm not saying we've got it right, but is changing the mindset of line managers and them believing and expecting that it is a learning environment. And I am going to give my best people an opportunity to do work on other interesting things, which are more around skill as opposed to my single job.
Interesting. And how are internal mobility programs changing retention rates for you?
Well, so when we started on this path 3 years ago, our internal mobility rates were about 38%. Today, they're at about 54%. I didn't check them before I came, but they hover between 54 and 56%. And I think, if I remember correctly, something like 48% of all of our employees globally have had a new opportunity. And so, look, I don't want to make it sound like I don't have a retention problem, because for Prudential and for our context, we do have a retention problem. Our numbers are definitely elevated than what they've been. But when I look across the stream of my competitors, whether they're in the insurance industry, the asset management industry, or even banking, my numbers are not nearly, I would take my set of cards over theirs any day. And I think it is because we do an employee engagement survey every year, and the one thing that we've changed the mark on is there's opportunities to grow and develop at this company. And that is not code for I get to go to a training program. That's code for I got a new opportunity to do a different job. And so many of our employees have had that I think we're suffering less from the retention issues.
Strategically, it's for us really important because, I mean, you might have seen on LinkedIn that we're looking to add 7,000 software engineers. That doesn't just mean recruiting that externally, it's also using the great people we have to see that they can kind of create a new skill and a new opportunity in that area. In our business case with Eightfold, we want to double our internal hire rate. And it's still early to say we've achieved that, but our first year's numbers are slightly ahead of where we're meant to be. So we are seeing more people get those opportunities. And what's important about that is if you don't create an environment where people really believe that they can grow and develop and there are opportunities, then that will mean that people will leave. Now we want to create an environment where people feel like it is an opportunity to grow, but also talk to alumni and other people about our organization being a true place where you can grow and develop and you get those opportunities.
And I'd imagine speaking about those win rate or those first victories, so to speak, is critical for building trust so that employees can see that and say, yes, absolutely, that is true. I applied for this position, I got it, and my manager was supportive because of the new policy and historically managers have been a little reluctant to let their star players go, which inevitably the star players are probably the ones that are the hungriest to learn something new.
Yeah, it's very interesting. We ran a design thinking session to say why would people use the environment, and it was counterintuitive what the answer was. The answer was why people would do it is search, which means people will invest the time in profiles and exploring different things, creating their talent profiles, if they believe that would allow them to search for good opportunities in terms of either jobs, but also learning, but things that are just a specific project that will give you a new skill. And we've seen our previous platform, we had quite a low adoption rate. We now have half the population in quite a small space of time creating this profile. And for me, that says that people are believing that if I invest that time, it is giving me specific opportunities. And that for us has been a success.
Excellent. And how are you dealing with the challenges of internal mobility in a hybrid and remote work environment? That's got to be tough. How do you make that happen with a remote worker and a hybrid worker?
So our policy is that I think everybody's demonstrated you can be productive in any environment.
Yeah.
So we're trying to just create an environment where If you're in the office, it's great. If you're not, but not exclude those that are not in the office. So at a ballpark level, it's kind of saying we expect people to have a hybrid in the future. Nobody's necessarily coming back 5 days a week. And it's been good. I mean, we've managed to recruit more diverse people that wouldn't necessarily be able to come into the office for things like call center environments. So for us, it's a normal part of our policy. We want to make sure people feel like it's a flexible environment because people have a new expectation of work and a new relationship to work and want the flexibility to be able to do a little bit of home in the middle, but also allow people to come back to the office for a good reason, not just to come back.
I think I feel a little bit more mixed about it, to be honest. And maybe it's the type of work that we do, but I'm sure that this work exists in Mark's organization too. So there's work that, making kind of a trade, being a trader on the trading desk, right? There's something about sitting there literally on the trading floor with other traders, hearing the trades and being shouted around you that really helps you learn and really helps you grow. And I think that as we've gone to this completely virtual environment, and the traders have been the first to come back in the office, convincing people who were fully remote and had the option of being fully remote or being very hybrid to say, actually, that's a job where if you want to grow into that job, you need to come back to the office, has created a higher hurdle for us because before they were all in the office and that learning by osmosis was something they knew they were doing. Now they've started to discount it. And that's a little bit of a challenge, I think, that we have to overcome and we have to really think about. The flip side is exactly what Mark said, which is all of a sudden my internal database of employees is 60,000 and it doesn't matter to me where they sit anymore. They can sit anywhere and I can put them into a role. But it's about how some of that learning on the job, the apprenticeship model that exists in financial services and other industries, how do we continue to foster that?
Yeah, for us, I think there is trying to bring people together for a purpose. I think there is serendipity with people being together, just new ideas and thought processes. These screens have become very transactional. So my focus on my team is bring people in where we do things together in terms of innovation or strategy and planning, because that connection is different if you're in a single room.
Mm-hmm. Is internal mobility the new retention strategy? Is it?
I think it's a key part of the retention strategy. I think we're actually in a very interesting time in HR right now, because I think simultaneously we're trying to grapple with three things, right? We're trying to grapple with getting people back in the office because we recognize that there is cultural nuances, loyalty that's built to the leaders, to the organizations that comes from that. And on the flip side, we don't want to push anybody because if you push people, then they're going to leave anyways, right? And so we're in this catch-22 where we want people to come back to the office, but we don't want to force them back to the office because either way we could risk losing them. And it's very transactional, right? Does it really matter if my laptop is furbished to me by Prudential versus MetLife if all I'm doing is press end at the end of every half hour? It feels very transactional. And so I think internal mobility and career development are key parts of what is going to help drive the longevity. But I actually think the currency of organizations is becoming flexibility.
I mean, for us, I think internal mobility is a central part of retention strategy, but it's also part of a strategy of delivering our corporate strategy. We want to become a next generation service and product provider. And that means we have to change the way we deliver things and the skills we have in our organization. And if we don't allow people to really believe that those new opportunities will come from the development that's available, we won't be able to recruit as many people as we need, and we'll lose this really rich source of people. So it's a very important part of our retention strategy, but I think it's more an important part of actually enabling our organization to make the changes we need to.
Mm-hmm. And how do you change the behavior of managers with AI machine learning data to teach them to use career pathing to help their employees and to pursue mobility? How do you change that and make that a win for them?
So we focused on making sure that line managers and employees think a little bit more in terms of this integrated talent engagement platform where all these different things come together. So your objectives, your learning, your opportunities. It's not this kind of once a year type discussion. Continuous feedback, we try and loop into that. But I think the big secret in this is making sure that what is proposed to line managers and employees is really personal and purposeful, not a generic kind of job or generic training. There's so much learning content. We make it really specific, and that ranges from suggesting playlists of people in that career that are very good, or to line managers saying, line managers like you are like exploring this type of training. So we're trying to make it personal and purposeful, which means people are spending a little bit more time in that environment, and then trying to change the expectation in the organization. We are a growth environment, which means it's part of our DNA. We learn and grow every single day, and it's part of the expectation. So those are kind of the key things that we're focusing on.
I think for us, we've, we are a very traditional company. And so the one thing we've had to do is help people understand that they can trust the AI and they can trust what we're going to do with the information. And I think in many ways, starting with just this is about development and growth was a really soft way for us to step into it, because they knew that we weren't trying to use the information to manage them out in the midst of this transformation. They knew how we were planning on using that information and what we wanted to do with it. Building their trust has been really important, because almost every 3 months or so, we're turning on new capabilities using that data and AI orientation. And it is really about making sure they now don't misuse it. And they don't use it as a way of getting to different outcomes that are not the intended outcomes that we're looking for. So we've spent a lot of time trying to energize and engage people around this is what this actually means, and this is not what it actually means.
And one of our narratives is around that you are really valued in the organization, which means that you have an opportunity to grow and develop in a unique personal way, and that you are valued, and therefore we invest in you and have these opportunities. That's a way we're trying to change the line managers' expectation, but also employees.
Yeah. Are you seeing AI machine learning-based pathing creating greater potential for empathy and creating empathy for associates? Because I think that's one of Eightfold's strengths is it does create empathy by having that very focused type of pathing that we saw, in the roadmap presentation today and in Ashley's presentation yesterday. Is that coming out in real life? Is that coming?
I think it is. I mean, we developed with Eightfold. We changed our kind of skills where people can go and self-assess their skills, and then they go to a line manager.
Yeah.
We split that into core skills and those that come from the Eightfold environment, because the core ones are just really important to us. But that's not self-sustaining, right? Once you've published it, it's probably out of date.
Yeah.
So we want to feed, but we're feeding both of those coming together, and then allowing employees and line managers to then have discussions about this, and then having that data flow into our learning experience platform, saying I'm having these type of discussions, therefore this would be a good way to do that. It's changing the narrative with line managers and employees in a positive way.
Yeah, I see it more as the catalyst for the conversation, and the conversation is really where the richness lies, right? It's about uncovering what somebody may want to do that they haven't done before, or something that they did and we never knew about. Because organizations tend to have tunnel vision, right? Mark has always been in HR because that's what I hired him into doing, but Mark may have actually done many different things in previous lives and experiences.
And speaking with other Eightfold customers, I've been really impressed with how it drives empathy with a data-driven discussion between managers and subordinates. Would you like to comment on that as well?
I think empathy will come from trust, right? And
Yes.
to your point about making sure people trust the AI and seeing it. And our early data is suggesting people are there, because the recommendations people feel are good.
Yeah.
And it's just opening up their eyes in terms of, I have a skill that is tangent into a different skill, and that opens up another opportunity. So I think that empathy is there, because you're having a real discussion with somebody, which is more about how you develop and grow, as opposed to kind of specific objectives in my singular part of the organization.
Yeah, and I think it's about, again, going back to accessibility and transparency. There's transparency left back to your employer and to your manager too, right? About this is actually the whole me, right? I can do these things that you know about, but I can also do these things that you didn't know about. And I think people like to feel seen and heard, and I think that's where the empathy comes in.
Yeah, excellent point.
But also we have what we call them heroes. We're trying to get internal narrative and storytelling from people that have great experiences. And we also share data, which is powerful. So one of the things that we wanted to achieve with Eightfold was having a more diverse group of people apply. Now, in the kind of 5 months we've been live, we have 144% more females compared to the previous year being hired. Now, what that is about is, I think the way that we've created it is somebody drops a CV and it says you're a strong match. It doesn't say that you've got these things. And we talk about that internally, because that will also encourage people to say this is really valuable and it's changing where we think.
Actually, Mark triggers something. We went back and we looked over, so we've been on this journey for about 3 years now. And at the end of 2 years, we went back and, because our working hypothesis was if you created accessibility and transparency, we would actually see more diverse pipelines. And our most diverse users are Black women from the age of 39 to 49. They're the greatest users of the platform, and they are the most satisfied users of our platform.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. And our final question, we've got about 5 minutes left, is what are the golden nuggets of best practices that you've seen and that you've been able to accumulate in your organizations?
For me, it is taking the time to do design thinking with a diverse group of people, different markets, different ages, different parts of career, junior, senior kind of grads coming in, and then using that to really understand what's important. We sometimes think we know, and intellectually we believe we know, but why I like design thinking, it talks about empathy, and sometimes even some people translate to love, but really understand why that's important, because you use that to then create these personas about how would we drive that. And then for me, the next thing is AI is amazing and brilliant. The technology is great, but you have to invest the time to make sure the data that sits behind that is ensuring really good recommendations. And that is from a learning course or an opportunity that might impart a skill that you need looking going forward. So take the time to invest in that, because that's the way that the AI continues to learn. And then you continue to improve on that, would be my 2 things.
And I would say that you very visibly need to show people that you're listening and responding and making changes as you go along. Because this is an iterative process, and internal mobility has to be an iterative process, right? You need to be able to feel like you grow into one role, you grow out of that role and into another role, and you need to show that the system and the foundation for that is also doing the same.
Excellent.
So we do that very publicly.
Which further stimulates trust and
Yes.
creates greater transparency.
Yes, exactly.
It's a virtuous cycle.
It is.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, we have 4 minutes left. Any questions from the audience? Anybody? Well, the empathy thread is fascinating to me. The connection of technology to empathy is, I think, absolutely fascinating. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about how the journey you were on, the journey of adopting Eightfold, and then how did you learn how to use data to become even more empathetic, so you created these honest, open discussions where the managers who inevitably have great performers and then have average performers, but the great performers are going to be the ones that are going to be the first to go. How did you build that out to be able to get that manager to let that go and not fear it?
We started by, we early in the journey, so I don't have a lot of data, but the focus is on, to your point earlier, Vicki, is around getting feedback and really responding to that and making it part of our focus. We also talk about employee listening in the whole. So not just pulse and survey stuff, but really trying to understand how people feel about this new environment, the new tools, and how we can improve them. And then a very structured way of saying what improvements come in from different areas, and then having a closed feedback loop to saying we are prioritizing these or those, and this is why we might not prioritize this, so that people feel like they can influence and change the environment.
Very good. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Walia, lead talent program at Moderna. We obviously are in a very unique position where we grew really, really quickly in the past couple of years. And I think with a lot of other people, we are kind of feeling a lot of the burnout out among our employees. So I'm just wondering if you can speak to how you truly incentivize for internal mobility, or how you incentivize for upskilling. And I think it also ties to culture, but just interested in learning a little bit more about that.
I have to tell you, that's one of the things that we've really struggled with, right? Because, so we started 3 years ago, but, in 2020, March, we sent everybody home to work from home. Unfortunately, everyone's kid got sent home too. And we had parents who were grappling with elder care responsibilities, with child care responsibilities, homeschooling. I taught grade 3 math for 6 months, and that was such a disaster. And so can you imagine saying to somebody, well, now we actually need you to upskill and reskill yourself? They're already burnt out. They're already stressed by these macro issues that are existing in the world around them. And now we're saying, and you need to upskill. And we actually had to start doing things like, we actually did 3 things. We actually created from June to June 2020 to June 21, we called it a year of learning, where we actually said to everybody, you get 1 day a month to go out and get badges. And we used, we actually, Eightfold was so quick to respond to us and partner with us on a badging philosophy and helping us create badges that meant something in our context, not in the context of a LinkedIn or anything like that. And the idea was, we need you to get 12 badges because these 12 badges are what's going to help us grow. And then we augmented that with a no meeting Friday. So once a month, you could take any day you wanted as a day of your learning. And the idea was you needed to get to these badges that you had to get over the course of the year. And then the second thing that we did is we went to no meeting Fridays, where the entire company would not do meetings. And between those two, we started creating the headspace for people to be able to learn. But that is still our challenge, is that people are still overwhelmed. And that works in these kind of micro instances, but we have these longer term academies for full stack developers, for UX, UI people, and we still struggle to get them to full capacity sometimes because people are saying, I just can't do that right now. And so that's a challenge.
Any further questions? Additional question? All right, well, thank you very much. Thank you, panelists.
Thank you.
That was fascinating.
Thank
Great
you.
conversation.
Thank you for having us.